All right, I'm jumping in today with some tips and tricks for painting furniture in a dark color. I'm doing this because dark colors have their own kind of special tricks you need to know to help them not have streaks when you finish them and to look nice and have nice solid dark color. There are some tips that will help you with that, and I'm going to talk about them today. And one reason I'm going to do that is because dark furniture, both black furniture and also what they're calling dark moody colors, deep teal, navy, a forest green, or even just kind of a deep olive hunter green kind of color. A lot of those colors are really popular right now. They're beautiful neutrals, especially black. It goes with anything. And so for those of you who are interested in light painting furniture, or for a lot of you who watch my channel who are interested in flipping furniture, painting it and flipping it, black is a good way to go. Always bet on black. It's a good one and it looks good. So let's talk about how to make it really look perfect when you're finished. I can't believe I just quoted Wesley Snipes in this video. How embarrassing. Real quick before I distract myself, I'm a painter and I also like to flip furniture sometimes. If you're somebody who's interested in furniture flipping, check below in the description. I have a little worksheet called Furniture Flip Pricing Worksheet. That's a free resource that you can grab to just help you figure out how much you should charge for things based on the amount of work you put into it, or how much you should pay for something based on what you're hoping to ask for it, and see, whether the numbers work out. It's also a great way to keep records of the things that you've done, how much you paid for them and how much you sold them for, and kind of what things are working the best for you. So check that out below. All right, let's talk about painting furniture black. The number one thing, you need to do this with all your furniture, but definitely when you're painting furniture black, you're going to a deep color. It may be quite different from the color that it started off with. You really don't want to have any chips or any places showing through. The very first step you need to do is clean the furniture really well. This is the way to set yourself up for success. So clean it well. If you use something that is like a degreaser and a surface prep, that will really help you. It will help make your paint stick better. It will help kind of keep the shininess and the glossiness from repelling your next coat of paint. So clean it well. If you need to, with used furniture, if you want to paint it and resell it, it's really important that you clean it well, not just so that it's not gross for you or for the next person using it, but also so that your paint will look the way you want it to, that you won't have weird stuff bleeding through. A lot of bleed through happens not just from tannins and things that are naturally occurring in the wood. A lot of the ones I see with used furniture, it's because something got spilled on there 20 years ago that you don't even see, but after you paint it, then this thing starts raising its head and bleeding through. So cleaning it really well, even if that means getting a toothbrush or some kind of brush to get down into the cracks, that's where those scary things sometimes live, and then they come back to haunt you. So clean it well. If you use something like, I think in this example I'm using Simple Green, you can use something like that, or a liquid deglosser, or any of those kinds of things. If it's one of those harsher cleaners, even Simple Green, you want to go back in afterwards and wipe it down with water so that you're getting those substances off, along with the dirt and the grime and everything else. Then once it's fully dry, then you're ready to go on to your next step. All right, your next step with dark furniture is doing a scuff sanding. I know that there are a lot of paints that claim that you don't need to sand, you don't need to prep, you don't need to prime, you don't need to do anything, but scuff sanding is always a good idea to get your paint to stick, especially because my next step that I'm going to recommend to you is not to put a big heavy duty primer on it. So sand it all over with a medium or fine grit sandpaper, just to break up that top surface of clear coat and give it a little bit of tooth that your paint can stick to. Don't try to sand it all the way down through the clear coat into the wood stain, because that's when you start having some things pop in and bleed through. So just rough up that top clear coat that's on there. And then the next thing you need to do after that, you got to make sure again that you're getting it very clean. You're going to have little tiny sanding dust all over it, down in the cracks and things. You're going to need to get that clean and get that out of all the cracks again, so your paint will really adhere, and you won't later have little spots showing up where the paint didn't stick because there was dirt or dust. So all the way down into the cracks. The easiest thing to use is a tack cloth. It's a sticky sort of oily cloth gauze that will help you get all that sanding dust out of there. And then again, if you can't get the tack cloth all the way down into every corner and stuff, use some kind of brush or some kind of blower, hair dryer, or a paintbrush that doesn't have anything on it to get all that stuff down out of the cracks so that it's nice and clean. Okay, the next step, and this is what I recommend specifically for dark surfaces, is try and find a paint with a primer included. If you want, I'm not going to take sides on whether you should use chalk paint or whether you should use mineral paint or whether you should use latex paint. All of those things can work if you are using them properly and prepping properly. But if you're using a latex paint, get one that has the primer included. And there are plenty of those that you can get, and just mix one product and it'll be one color. But that will help it stick better because, you know, a lot of us, I see a lot of newbies who watch furniture painting videos and they think, okay, to avoid bleed through and to get the paint to stick, I need to always put this primer coat on top, and it needs to be a really heavy duty one that I put on there first and then I paint everything. I'm gonna recommend that if you are painting a dark color, don't put white primer on it. Don't do that step, because you're making extra work for yourself. The furniture is already some color of brown, whether it's a light brown or a dark brown. Either of those colors is closer to the color you're trying to get than white. So when you're painting something white, I think it's great to put a white primer on it, because you're more likely to have bleed through, and you're painting it white anyway. You're not taking really any extra steps. If you have a dark piece of furniture and you need to make it white, you're probably going to need 3 coats. It's likely, at least in some places, 3 coats of white paint to get it to the right color. So what you can do instead is 1 coat of a good primer that's white, and then you'll only need 2 coats of white paint. So you're not doing any extra work, you're just using a different product for that first coat. So I think that's a great thing to do when you're painting it white. So one tip is, make sure you know what color you want to paint it before you start priming and prepping. Make that decision and stick with it, because otherwise you do a lot of extra steps. I sometimes watch videos of people who are doing that. They just start off, they don't know what they're going to do yet, but they start off by sanding and prepping and priming with white, and then they decide what color they want to do it. Make your plan first. It can save you some time. I mean, time is valuable, you know, even if you're not flipping it, even if you think you have all the time in the world, time is your life, and your life is the most valuable thing you have. So don't waste it. Don't do extra steps you don't need to do. If you are worried about bleed through on a particular piece of furniture, first of all, if you're doing a very dark color, the chances of something bleeding through that you can see are less likely. That doesn't mean that it will never happen. If you have like a knot hole in a piece of pine furniture and some of that sap bleeds through, it kind of has a different texture even than the rest of the wood, and so you may be able to see that on a dark painted piece. And so I'm not saying there's never a bleed through issue, but if you're concerned that there will be, then I recommend that you either spot treat it with like a can of spray shellac in the places where you think it's the most likely to have problems, or use something like Dixie Belle makes a product called Boss, B-O-S-S, that is for blocking stain. And they make it in white, but they also make it in clear. And so you can use the clear one. That way you're still closer to the color you're going to end up than if you painted it white. So I would recommend one of those 2 things. Shellac, spray shellac also will come out clear or a little bit yellow, so it won't alter the color of your furniture that you're painting. They may make some products that are white that are spray shellac. I recommend using the clear one if you're doing a dark painted finish. Keep this in mind, even gray primer, the color that's called like primer gray that you're used to seeing on a car that's having work done or something on top of the Bondo, that gray color, and some primers will come in that gray color, that would be a better choice than a white primer if you feel like you need to prime something and then paint it in a dark color, because the gray is you're already halfway there. You won't need as many coats of your dark color to get a nice solid finish. And so I definitely would recommend that you pick a gray or a clear primer, or paint with primer in it. Those things will get you there quicker than painting it white, all the way white, and then going back to black again. The next step, once you've spot treated or done whatever you need to for blocking any kind of bleed through or stains, is to lay on the paint with a very soft brush so that you can get a nice smooth surface. So if that means you need to thin if you're using chalk paint, you may need to thin it down a little or spray it with some water while you're painting so that you can get a nice smooth surface. You want as few brush strokes as possible. A soft synthetic brush can help you get a smoother surface, and then if it still looks like it has too many brush strokes in it for you, I did a video about this recently, just about painting without brush strokes, and these are some of the similar points to get a nice smooth dark finish. But if you still think it has too many brush strokes, you can roll on top of it Or you can put the whole thing on if your piece is flat enough with a high density foam roller. And that's a way to get a nice smooth finish and lay that dark paint in. All right, the next thing you need to do is 2 or 3 coats, depending on what you need, to really get nice full coverage, a completely dark color. Make sure there's no kind of wood colors shining through in any places. Look at it in a good light. Make sure you have good light so you can see that you're getting full coverage. You don't want to discover after the fact that there's some places where your paint looks a little thin. So make sure you get enough coats on there to get that nice velvety dark finish that you're looking for. Now if you feel like it's a little rough, you want to make sure that it's plenty smooth, you can do a fine grit sanding in between coats. Let it dry fully, do a very fine grit 220 or above sandpaper, and lightly sand. And then, super important, because that will sometimes make it powdery and not dark looking anymore when you sand it like that. So it's very important that you wipe it down and get it completely, all the dust and stuff off of there so you can get the darkest color possible. Now the final trick to do if you are going to go for a really dark finish is when you're doing the clear coat, people go crazy with getting streaks in their clear coat when they're trying to seal it. After they've done all this work to get a beautiful dark piece, but they need to seal it. And if you're using chalk paint, you will need to seal it with some kind of a clear coat. You can use wax, and that will usually not be too streaky once it dries fully. It may look streaky when it's going on, but once it's fully dry, you should be okay. But if it's a high traffic area or something that's going to get a lot of wear and tear, then I recommend that you use something like a polyurethane, some kind of acrylic sealant. And if you're going to do that, sometimes people get really frustrated that they get these kind of light colored milky streaks in it after it dries, after they've worked so hard to get this beautiful dark finish. So a trick that a lot of people have mentioned this on the internet, so you may have heard, to put like a little bit of your paint into the clear coat when you're painting it. But I would say you can put more than just a little bit. I mean, you can mix it even as much as like a 50-50 mix if you want to, because then it's almost like you're getting kind of a last coat of your dark color and your clear coat at the same time. So mix those together as long as they're both water-based and can mix together. You can do that and put those together and put them on, and then you're going to have less chance of getting streaks and you're going to have more chance of adding more of that dark color in there. Another thing I will say to keep any imperfections from showing up is to use something that's less shiny as your clear coat. So a matte or a satin, I wouldn't go super shiny on it because then you will see a lot more little imperfections when you're painting it. And a trick to getting that clear coat on, you know, if you're not as comfortable with a brush or you're seeing brush strokes that you don't like, is using some kind of foam to put the clear coat on. There's a lot of different options for using some kind of foam roller or just a foam brush, or some people use like a foam pad to put that on, because it will end up going on smoother without brush strokes for your clear coat. So you can use a foam, just a cheap, inexpensive foam brush will work for that. I just found some at Tuesday Morning. It's like a package of 20 for $5. So you can't beat that. You can use those even if it's something that isn't water-based that you're going to need to just throw away later because they're not expensive. So that's a good solution. All right, guys, drop a comment below and tell me what colors you have liked painting with lately. What deep, dark colors are you using? I'm planning on painting some bookshelves in kind of a deep blue, but I haven't chosen the color yet. So let me know what your favorite colors are that you've been working with. All right, see you next time. Thanks for watching.